Well, I am nervous about the Shapiro pick. One, because I think it's probably between him and Bashir at this point. I really like
Hmm.
Walls, but it just felt like that was more of a role where he would be a bit of an attack dog and articulate issues for the Democrats in a way that maybe they would want for electoral gains, but possibly not on the ticket in and of itself. So, I mean, if she selects Shapiro, okay, then we're signaling this is business as usual. But if she selects someone like Bashir, who or Walls, but I think that's more of a long shot at this point. The UAW, Sean Fain have endorsed Kamala Harris at this point. Then, after endorsing her, Sean Fain went on CNN and he said that his preferences were between Walls and Bashir. So if she signals that if she picks Shapiro in the face of all of that and labor and the left and uh, a lot of organizers basically saying that we don't want Shapiro, then I think that that's a clear signal that this campaign is going to be about business as usual as opposed to change. And I know that the Democrats are incompetent. I have been covering that for quite a while, and they're scared of their own shadow. But over the past few weeks, I have felt like, at the very least, they want to win. And picking Shapiro, in my view, is not a winning strategy outside of Pennsylvania. And then it puts some issues in front of you as it relates to Michigan because of the uncommitted vote. So I don't think that a Shapiro pick would be smart electorally, nor do I think it would be smart in terms of shoring up the base. So I think it's going to be Bashir, but I'm knocking on wood because I actually want this campaign to be an example of Democrats having learned the lesson over the past few years, because there have been some Democratic governors that have, and they've been a part of this audition process, whether it be Pritzker or Whitmer or Walls. These are these kind of Midwestern governors who have
All a
decided,
better choice than Josh Shapiro, in my opinion.
all better choices, but who have actually decided to govern. And like Walls in particular, free lunches and making
Mhm.
things easier for people in those states to actually live lives and have true freedom, which is freedom from constantly having to worry about when you're going to get your next paycheck to pay your bills and things like that. So part of me wants to feel optimistic about the Democrats here because they did the right thing by moving aside from Biden. But if she selects Shapiro, I'm going to be quite critical, I think.
Yeah, I think that's all on the nose. Although some people have pushed back and said that you might just be a victim of progressive misinformation. You know, your former colleague took to Newsweek. Rare that he publishes an article. He says, "Don't fall for the misinformation campaign. Josh Shapiro is the progressive choice for VP." And of course, Gavin and I had to get in on the fun and put that he has recently reaffirmed his support for business tax cuts. He compared student protesters to the Ku Klux Klan.
Wait, so I
He has
haven't seen this yet. Who wrote that piece?
Cenk. He wrote it himself. He published it in Newsweek. Here, I'll
From
go ahead and
Newsweek?
yeah, I'll go ahead and pull it
Yeah,
up for
we
you. My bad.
definitely have a disagreement there.
Yeah, I think he has a disagreement with the entirety of the left, and I'm not trying to pick on Cenk because I know you guys are colleagues, but he's just completely off base here. I feel like if you read this, he talks about how we actually should, if your most critical issue is Palestine, you should get behind Josh Shapiro because he's actually criticized Netanyahu and all this stuff, which is absolutely absurd because his policy on Palestine is horrible. And he also has pretty pro-business credentials, and he's bad with labor. So I just don't understand that kind of perspective here. And I'm a little taken aback at how the left can't even unify around a guy like Waltz or Bashir when they're so I don't know. It just seems like we can't get our act together at all when we had maybe not a huge moment. Gavin and I were debating the extent to which Kamala Harris and Eric Holder would even be considering the Twitter momentum that they've been building for themselves in the brat summer.
Fair point.
But if they are in any capacity, we should be unified around a singular result. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely have a disagreement with Cenk there. I feel that Josh Shapiro would be. I would need to read the article honestly because I'm curious as to what the reasoning would be. Josh Shapiro isn't just somebody who has compared the pro-Palestine anti-genocide demonstrators to the Ku Klux Klan. He has also, I believe, made a statement very clearly in the past. Yeah, here it is in 2021. He moved to punish Ben and Jerry's for not licensing ice cream for sale in illegal West Bank settlements. And that in and of itself, I feel like is a fairly extreme position.
Yeah, 100%. And to read his position, this is crazy. I just want to give Cenk his, ability to argue for himself because I, know you're not familiar with it. He says his position on Israel is correct, though his optics are terrible. Like all sane people, Shapiro supports a two-state solution and a free, independent Palestine. As for his support for Israel, consider his remarks about its leader. I personally believe Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time, which is like run-of-the-mill, like everybody in Israel, besides the rabid right wing hates Netanyahu. He says, Shapiro said in January, months before Chuck Schumer came out against Netanyahu, I couldn't agree more. And Shapiro was ahead of the curve in pointing this out. That was also about the same time Bernie Sanders was calling for a humanitarian pause in Gaza instead of a ceasefire. But he makes that point. It's not like Josh Shapiro ever came out and called for a ceasefire.
I think it's a fundamental difference in how a lot of the left feels about Israel-Palestine versus that framing here. I mean, I'm somebody that doesn't believe the two-state solution is possible, nor do I believe it is feasible. I think it's a liberal Zionist stalling tactic that has been used since 1967 for Israel to continuously take more and more land. And so it's about basically apartheid, right? And when you put it in terms of racial segregation, liberals should be able to fundamentally understand that, but we have warped the entire conversation around Palestine in this country to one where it's just inherent, even when people talk about anti-racism, that of course Palestinians and Israelis have to be separate. I mean, of course there has to be a wall between them. Of course Israel has all the land that's on the sea, that's best for trade, and that's why they're decimating Gaza right now, because they want all of the land that borders the sea, and then eventually they want it to the river. But like the reality is that there's no outcome here that is either, there's two options. There is eventually this wall gets torn down and Palestinians have the right to return, and Israelis and Palestinians live side by side in a racially integrated society where it's about 50-50, or they get genocided and ethnically cleansed out of the land that Israel wants to take. So I fundamentally disagree with like anyone that is propping up a two-state solution, which by the way is like the entirety of the Democratic Party at this point, which is why you can't go to Democrats to get accurate readings of Israel-Palestine. You have to look to historians or people like Ilan Pappé or Avi Shlaim, Israeli new historians, let alone, I had Diana Boutou on the show today, who's a longtime Palestinian human rights lawyer. The way that we talk about Israel-Palestine in this country is just completely disconnected from the realities on the ground. So I totally disagree with that point. He's an anti-BDS candidate in particular, given his attacks on Ben and Jerry's for choosing to sell in illegal settlements there. So yeah, I really don't understand that
BDS in the West Bank at all.
Yeah. Right. Which is a baseline position for anybody. At least don't be adversarial to BDS. And then it's more than Palestine as it relates to Shapiro. Shapiro is a pro-school choice, so he is a retrograde Democrat in that way. I mean, thankfully, I feel like we've moved past the charter school Democrats of the Obama era, but they still remain, and selecting him would signal, okay, this is back to like 2010 levels of Democrats, which I really hope is not the case. Shapiro also has signaled that he is against raising taxes for corporations, which is different and diametrically opposed to Kamala Harris's rhetoric so far and the good things domestically that the Biden administration did, like antitrust, like cracking down on union busting and things like that. So
standing on a picket line.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Bashir has stood on the UAW picket line, and that's in part why Sean Fain had said that Bashir would be a good choice. So yeah, I don't understand what case could be made. I think it would be obvious that Shapiro would be a signal to corporate donors and to the center that Kamala Harris is not going to change much fundamentally.
I mean, it really did bifurcate into two camps pretty quickly, and you're online. I feel like you would have witnessed this. It was Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro. And I thought Josh Shapiro was going to be out of the running when there was the scandal at his office and he hired a Republican consultant, and that guy had a bunch of bad behavior, shockingly. Right. And he did absolutely nothing about it and covered it up. And I was like, well, that kind of flies in the face of Kamala Harris. It's tough on crime. I'm not going to, tolerate abusers.
Good
kind
point.
of
Yeah.
position. But from what I've seen, there's a lot of leaks coming out of Philadelphia, and even people from Philadelphia labor that shows that, yeah, I mean, it's going to be Shapiro, and they do.
I don't know about that. I mean, look,
Yeah,
here. So
I think
I
there's
love
also a lot
sports
of reason
too.
to think that Andy Bashir is going to be the pick, not Shapiro. I think a lot of people are getting ahead of themselves. Also, Bashir is a 2-term governor. He actually has serious executive experience in a way that I just don't think that Josh Shapiro has. He just got the governor's mansion. He just won that race like a couple of years ago. Bashir has serious executive experience that could balance out Kamala's lack thereof. You know, she's only been a senator and an AG, right? So I think that brings so much more to the ticket as well.